Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming and joining us as we welcome in A.B. Spry, Aaron Swade, Mel Zachter, Marshall Castle, Yitzi Muller, Stephen Holtzman, and Bruce Eisenberg, 2 nights in a row. Tomorrow night he gets a star. Baruch Ian, Irving Fishbaum, writing, and Menachem Umansky, Nachman Chapples, Dr. Block, Matthew Guy, Yisrael Fisher, Eddie Chazan, Avram Schenkman, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Rabbi Kranz, Abe Arbach, Pesach Zigelman. Wow, Aryeh Perlman is joining us. Now that's a nice thing, making us happy on this evening. Richard Rosenzweig is joining us now. David Helfgott, Saba here in the shul, and Reb Kramer and Berish Gesseman. Ilya Shutman is joining us. That's good. And we are learning, sponsored by Baruch Ian and family, Nishmas Estebas Yona, Yaakov Chaim Ben Abba, Avram Ben Shmuel HaKohen, for the refuah of Baruch Shlomo Ben Lina, by Aaron Swade for his first wife, Chana Bas Shmuel, and his sister, Freda Bas Shol, by Shimon Der for the Chayla Yadaf and Chayla Yisrael, by Mark Frankel, for Shalema for Chana Bas Gittel Esther, and Miriam Sarah Bas Sipor, by Berich Goldwasser for Hakar Satayv, for what Hashem did for his family and the Chayla Yisrael, for my Shvar Vigdaya Ben Rivka, Meir Ben Chayasaru, who is still in the hospital, for Yudah Cyril Bas Miriam, and we'll learn for the baby, Tinnik Ben Chava. You should get out of the NICU quickly and be able to have the bris soon. We...
Can you also add a name, sorry, Lil Nishbas Bronya Bas David Shloshim today.
Lil Nishbas Bronya Bas David on the Shloshim. Neshama should have an aliyah.
Thank you.
And we are holding at the top line of Daf Ayin Amud Aleph. It's a long daf. That means, like Irving tells us, every word is a mitzvah. That's a lot of mitzvahs, but it's not a hard daf. So just sit back and enjoy the nitzchias of Limud HaTorah as we learn also for the protection of our soldiers of the Bnei Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael and worldwide over, that the hostages should be recovered and that the chaylim should get better, as we welcome in Naftali Jablin and we welcome in David Elfgad and Karl Loshin. So the Mishnah, the Gemara is telling us how we know all the 10 categories went up from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. So Geirei v'charurei, how do we know that converts and freed slaves came up? Minalan, Amrav Chisda, Da'amar Krav, V'kol HaNival, all those that separated from the contamination of the nations of the earth joined them. So that includes Gerim that separated from the nations of the earth, and of course freed slaves that were once slaves. They were once from the nations of the earth. Mamzerei minala, and how do we know that Mamzerim went up with Ezra to Eretz Yisrael? Dichsiv Ayishma Sambala Tacharani. And it was heard by Sambala Tacharoni, V'toivyo ha'eved ha'amoini, and Toivyo, the Ammonite slave, V'ksiv, ki rabim b'Yehuda balei shvu aloi. And many people in Yehuda took an oath to him. They held allegiance to him, to this Tovya, ki chosen hu l'Shchanya ben Arach, because he was the son-in-law of Shchanya ben Arach, the Yehonis Beno, and Yehonis and his son, Lokach as Bas Mishalem ben Berachia. Now here we have, let's follow the trail over here. We have that Tuvia was a Ammonite Eved, and it says that he was a son-in-law of Shchanya ben Arach. That means that he married the daughter of Shchanya ben Arach, the Yehonis Benai, and Toivya's son, Lokach, as Bas Shalom ben Brachia. Now the son would be an Eved, and he slept with a Bas Yisrael. Now if you hold Eved v'Ovid Kechav Mabah Bas Yisrael Havlad Mamzer, so then the child will be a Mamzer. So that means the Gemara assumes that he came up with Ezra to Eretz Yisrael. So that means there's a mamzer in Eretz Yisrael. So the Gemara says, but that's honey. Not everybody holds an Eved Bas Yisrael Havlad mamzer. Some hold that the Vlad is a pogum, but not a mamzer. Elamandi Yamar Avlad Kosher Mayi Kilamema. And furthermore, Vesu, who says they had children? There would be a mamzer if they had children, but who says they had children? Dilma loyavalei b'nei. And furthermore, how do you know they came up with Ezra? Maybe they were there in Eretz Yisrael from before. The who says that they originated in Bavel and came up with Ezra to Eretz Yisrael. Dilma hasamavi. Maybe they were from the prior population in Eretz Yisrael. Ella mehacha. We know from the following sequence of psukim. The elu ha'olim, these are those that came up. Mitel melech, that means the mound of the salt. Tel chasha, the mound of either silence or plowing. Kruv adain, and va'omer. So literally this pasuk means these that came up from the following places. Tel melech, tel chasha, kruv, adan, and amar. And they weren't able to tell their pedigree, Vizaram, and their descendants in Yisrael, if they were Jews. In other words, they couldn't prove that they had the proper pedigree. Now, what was the problem with their pedigree? So the Gemara tells us, Tel Melech, Elu b'nei Adam shedoimim maseyim l'maisa sedoim. These are people that their actions, look at this week's parsha, Rabbi say. These are people whose actions mimicked the ways of Sodom, shenefcha l'tel melech, that was turned into a heap of salt. Now the Medrash tells us, as Rashi brings down, that Sodom, who we are introduced to in this week's parsha, had a wicked way that if somebody caused a woman to miscarry, so let's say there was a woman, Sally, who Chatzkel caused to miscarry, so they would tell the assailant, they would tell the one that attacked, have beer with her, a married woman, and impregnate her again. That was the kruma justice of Sodom. So that means they would tell him sleep with a married woman. So in Sodom, there was mamzeris. So these are people that came up that also had mamzeris, that their actions mimicked the ways of Sodom. Tel charsha, zeh shekoira abba, this is a person who, when he calls a person his father, v'imay mishas kasai, and the mother silences him because it's not really his father. We don't know who the father is. Or it is the father, but the mother doesn't want people to know that that's the father because she committed adultery. Right? So either it's a shtuki, that we don't know who the father is, so that's a suspect that she kept adultery, or she silences the child because the child is about to give away that is the father, and she doesn't want people to know because she committed adultery. So that's the lashon of tel charsha. V'lo yachlu lahagid beis avaisam v'zaram, and they're not able to reveal their parents and their descendants in Yisrael Haim. This is people zel asufi. These are foundlings that we don't know who the father is or who the mother is. Shenefet nesef minashuk. They were found gathered in from the street. Kruv adain. What does it mean? Kruv adain. V'amar Rabbi Yavo. Amar adain. The Lord said, Ani amarti you Yisrael lefanei chashuvim kikruv. I thought that Klal Yisrael would be precious to me. As Kruvim, v'heim samu atzmam kinomer, and they made themselves as promiscuous as a leopard. A leopard is very promiscuous. So again, these are people that are lustful and promiscuous and licentious and full of mamzerus. That's the three last words in the pasuk. Kruv adain v'amar. That means that the Rabbeinu Shalom, the adain, says, I thought that they would be beloved to me like a angelic kruv, and they acted like a leopard. Now, the Ikad Amrei over here is a very heartening one, in that even when Klal Yisrael is promiscuous, Hashem still loves them. Now that's a very big chiddush, because it says, Elokeinu shel elu zoynei zima. Our God hates lust. He hates promiscuity. And yet, Ikid Amrei Amar B'Yavo Amar Adain, the Lord said, Afal Pisha Samu Atzmam Kinamer, even though they behaved as immoral as a leopard, Heim Kashuvim Lefanai Kikruv. They are like to me like a kruv. Hashem still loves us. Amar Rabba Barbachana Kol Anoisei Isha She'ena Genes like whoever marries a woman that's not fit for him. In other words, the genealogy is not roy for the person. He's marrying a person that he's not supposed to. Rashi says that this means psulalai, somebody that's unfit, like a Kohen Gadol marries an almana, a grusha marries a Kohen hedyot, a person marries a mamzer or a nasan. Mala lavakasav, the Torah considers it kilu chorshu l'kala ilam kulai. It's as if he plowed the world with zoro melech and planted it with salt. When you plow and plant salt, you ruin the land. Shenemar, because it says, the beginning of the pasuk talks about those that did not marry correctly, and it says, "Ve'elu ha'olam etel melech tel charsha." They are considered as if they plowed the word and filled it with salt. Now here we have the problem of a person who is lured for money to marry somebody that's not worthy of him. That's the way Rashi learns. It doesn't mean that he just falls into the trap of marrying for money, but it means that he marries for money a person that's not worthy of him, that's not fit for him. He'll have improper children. He'll have unworthy children. Shenemar, and this is a pasuk in Hosea that we darshan, as we welcome in Sandy Grunfeld and Harrison Kletzel. Ba'Hashem Bagdu, you dealt treacherously with the Lord. Kibanim Zorim Yuladu, you had strange children. So here it is, you dealt treacherously with the Lord, marrying children that are zorim to you, that are unfit to you. And it says in the pasuk, Ata yoichlu chaydish eskalkeim. Your portions will be consumed. The money that you thought you'd get out of it will be lost. Well, at least you made money. New people will come along and eat up your portion. Says the Gemara, I might think that the husband will lose the money, but the wife won't lose the money. He'll lose the money, she won't. That this will happen only after a long time, so at least they'll enjoy it for a while. It'll happen soon. My mashma, how does Chodesh mean soon? A month will come, a month will go, and the ill-gotten gains will be lost. Rabba said, and others say, Rabbi Salah, and others in the name of Rabbi Hamnuna, whoever marries a woman that's not fit for him, Elio binds him, Kadosh Baruch Hu writes, and Hashem flogs him. In other words, he's going to suffer. Elio writes down, Kadosh Baruch Hu chaisim, and Hashem seals it. Woe to a person who disqualifies his seed and taints his family, marrying a woman that's not fit for him. Elio binds him. HaKadosh Baruch Hu writes it. Anybody that passes other people's genealogy and walks around parceling other people's genealogy, puzzle. You should know that that's a sign that he himself is puzzle. He doesn't speak about the good of people. So if he calls people avodim, you should know that that's a sign that he's an evid. If he calls people a mamzer, that's a sign that he's a mamzer. That's a rule in general. This is something that I found in people, that people ascribe to other people their own deficiencies. So a Baal Gaiva will say, oh, look at that person, he's full of himself. A person that's a thief will say, oh, yeah, I bet you he stole it. That's the way people ascribe to other people their own deficiencies.
Rabbi, the Isha Shalei Hageneslay, does that mean also different ages besides the genealogy?
No, it's not talking about that now. No. It's not talking about Min B'Shein Amina, it's just talking about a psul and genealogy. We'll talk about other things later on. Now here the Gemara tells us a story. Fasten your seatbelts for an interesting story. As I said, sit back and enjoy. Sit back and enjoy. How gathered in Narda, there was a man from Narda. The Ulabay, we're not going to call him Marshall, but he was a troublemaker. No, we're not going to call him Marshall.
Thank you.
How gathered in Narda, there was a man from Narda, the Ulabay mit Bechaya B'Padisa. He went into a butcher shop in Pimpadisa. Amalu, and he says, he was full of himself, and he said, Havali Bisra, come, I want, give me a slice of beef. Amrulay, so they said to him, hold your horses. Nitar ad Shakal Shamed Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel. We have here the attendant of the great Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel. Have covered our Torah. Wait until we take care of the attendant of Rabbi Yehuda bar Yecheskel. V'neisavlach, and then we'll give you. Amar, he didn't like it. He didn't wait for no man. Amar man Yehuda bar Shveiskel. Who is this Yehuda bar Shveiskel? That's a play on word. Shveisk means roasted. Who's this man that likes his roasted meat? The kadamli that he gets before me. The shakalman kamoy that he gets to be served before me. So Ozlu Amalei the Rabbi Yehuda. So the attendant went to Rabbi Yehuda and talked about this man's disrespect to Kavod Torah. Shamte. So Rabbi Yehuda excommunicated him. Amru, so they told Rabbi Yehuda, Ragel the Kari Inche Avde. He has a habit that he calls people Avadim. Now, this is right along what we just learned, Kala Paisel B'mumai Paisel. So immediately, Achraz Alei de Avdahu. Immediately, Rabbi Yehuda proclaimed that he's an Eved. So the other person, it's one thing, to put him in a band, but to call him an Eved, so this man from Nardo was not taking it sitting. He summoned him, he sent him Azman to Rav Nachman. I say Piskada Azmana. So the great Rav Yehuda got a summons to the court of Rav Nachman. Now, that's like, sending a summons to Rav Palm. It's like sending a summons, to a gadol. So he wasn't sure what to do. So Azul Rabbi Yehuda l'kamei Rav Huna. So Rav Yehuda went to the great Rav Huna and said, "Should I appear in the court before Rav Nachman?" Rav Yehuda was senior to Rav Nachman. Amrulei Ezel Eloi Ezel. Should I go or not? Amalei. So Rav Huna said, "Mezel loy mibayalach lemezel." You don't have to go. Mishum de Gavra Rabat. You're much greater than Rav Nachman. Ela mishum Yakur de Beinesiya. But because Rav Nachman is from the Reish Galusa's house, so because of the honor of the Nasi, Kumzil, you should go. So Rabbi Yehuda appeared. Ashkechei de Ka'avin Makkah. He found that Rav Nachman was making a makkah, a parapet around his roof. Amalei, so he said to him, you're a Rav of the Tzibur. A Rav is not supposed to do manual labor. When you're the Rav of a community, you're not allowed to do work in front of three people. So Amalei, so he defended himself. I'm making a small fence, 10 tvachim high, for the mitzvah of Makkah. And a mitzvah you're allowed to do because a mitzvah no matter what your station is, it's not demeaning to do a mitzvah. But then Rav Yehuda started saying, why are you talking in such fancy words? Amalei misanya Makkah d'chsiv baraisa. Why is it hateful to you, Makkah, the lashon of the Torah? Oy mechitza da'amar rabban. What are you using this fancy word, dugundorisa? Amalei, so then he said, Yosef mar akarpita. Let the master sit on this stool. Amalei misani safsel dam rabbanan. Is it hateful to you to say a bench, the term of the rabbanan, or itztava the imrei inshe, or a platform, the way people talk? Why are you talking with such puffed up language? It's been suggested that maybe he did so because he was habituated to court of the Nasi. Amalei leichel mar esrunga. Have some esrig. So again, esrunga is very fancy terminology. Amalei hachi amishmol kol aimer esrunga. Whoever says esrunga tilsa baramas rucha. He's a third of arrogance, because there's arrogance in thought, arrogance in speech, and arrogance in action. So your speech shows arrogance. That's a third of arrogance. Oy esrig your rabbanon. You should say esrig like the rabbanon call it. Oy esroiga de amriinche. What's esroinga? Amalei lishke mar anavga. Have a drink. Now they used to have a medicinal drink in the morning that was called asparagus in a revius cup. Amalei mi soni asparagus to your rabbanon. Is it hateful to you to say asparagus like the rabbanon? Oy anpik, which is a revius, the imrei inshe. Why are you saying a navga? Amalei tesi doinag tashkinan. Let my daughter Doina come and give you a drink. Amalei hachi amishmol emish tamshim beisha. You don't use a woman because you don't want to get used to serving men. Ktanahi. So he said that's not a defense. So then he had a well-known wife, Yalta. So he said, does the master want to send a regards to my wife, Yalta? If I talk to her, I'll hear her response. You're not supposed to hear the voice of a woman. So he said, you could send it with someone else, so you don't have to hear her. So Shmuel says you don't get familiar with a married woman. So he said, but you could do it through me, through the husband. Now his wife heard how Rav Nachman was getting geschmettert. Everything he said, he was being refuted. So she sent him advice. It says a woman is for advice. That's why it says that Hashem created Hatzela. Hatzela is the same letters as Le'etza. A woman is for Eitza. Ishtecha Gutza, if your wife is... If your wife is short, Ishtecha Gutza, Gachish V'lochishla, bend down and listen to her advice, So his wife sent him the following advice. Sholchalei to be sayu, Sharilei Tigra. Take care of his problem and get rid of him. Sholchalei Tigre, the Lord Nishabia Kishar Amaretz. He's making you like any other Amaretz. Amalei, so Rav Nachman took advice from his wife and said to Rav Yehuda, Maishi Ate Demarach. What brought the master here? Amalei, so he said to him, Taska das Menusa Shadamara Basroi. You sent me a summons to your Bezdin. Amalei, so he says incredulously, you think I would send you a summons? He says, I don't even know how to talk to you. Amalei Ashta Shusa Damarloi Gamir, and I don't even know your language. Taska das Menusa Mishadras Lamar. You think I would send a summons? So Apik Diska das Menusa. So Rabbi Yehuda took out of his breast pocket the summons. So Amalei, he says, and Rabbi Yehuda said to him, Gavri, here's the man, and here's the summons. So Rav Nachman told him, look, I can't just send you away, because then it'll say that the Rabbanan flatter each other, and they're not even-handed. Let's talk about it. That people shouldn't say that the Rabbanon are covering up for one or the other. Amalei, Rav Nachman said, "My time is shamtei ma'alahu gava." Why did you put him in excommunication? So he said, "Tzir shlichad Rabbanon." He was mitzayir shlichad Rabbanon. He said, "Who's Rav Yehuda bar Shveskel that I should wait for him?" So v'nagdeimar. So then you should have flogged him. The Rav mangid alman the mitzayir shlichad Rabbanon. Rav flogged someone who was mitzayir shlichad Rabbanon. So Rav Yehuda says, I saw that the person was very, very arrogant. The Adif Minei Abdullah, I did to him more, I excommunicated him. So my time Achriz Mara Leida Abdu, why did the master proclaim that he was an Eved? Amalei, he said to him, Ragul the Kari Inche Avde, because he was accustomed to calling people Avadim, Vitani Kala Paisel Pasel, anybody who passes other people is puzzle. He never speaks of good of people. That he passes people with his mum. So Rav Nachman said, Shmuel might have just said that you should be chayshish that he's an Eved. But to paskin and announce that he's Eved, mi Omar. Now that was a very strong question that Rav Nachman asked. But in the meantime, Amalei Hahu Bardine Rav Yehuda, remember the other litigant, this man from Nardo was there. So he said to Rav Yehuda, you have some nerve. Lididi Karasli Avda, you're calling me Eved. Dasina Bebeis Chashmonayim Malka, I descended from the Chashmonayim dynasty. Oh, then Rav Yehuda says, you just sealed your fate. Whoever says he's from the Chashmonayim dynasty, Avdu. We'll see that at the end of the Chashmonayim dynasty, there was just left, as we'll see momentarily, one girl left, and she fell off a roof and announced, I'm the last true Chashmonai, and we were taken over by slaves. Whoever says from now on they're from Chashmonai, you should know they're from slaves. Amalei, so he said to him, Lo Yisavam Lamar Lahad Amar Rav Abba Amar Rav Huna Amar Rav. So Rav Nachman said, you're saying now a dictum, but we only know the dictum from you. But you have negias because you're now in court. And doesn't a master hold of what Rav Abba said in the name of Rav Huna Amar Rav, that called Talmid Chacham Shemoira Halacha Ba, any Talmid Chacham that paskin something, Im Koydem Ma'isa Amra, if he says it before it's in his own self-defense. So if he said it before he was Negei L'Ma'isa Shaimelai, Vim Lav, but if he says it only after when it's in his own defense, ain't Shaimelai. Amalei Rav Yehuda says that's a good point. But he could Rav Masna the Koi Kavase. Rav Masna also heard this in the name of Shmuel. It's not just me. Now here you see how Hashem defends the righteous ones. Rav Masna leichazil Narda tleisa shnei. Rav Masna didn't show up in Narda for 13 years. Hahu Yoma Asa. On that day he came. Amalei, so Rav Yehuda said to Rav Masna, Dochir Mar, does the master remember my Omer Shmuel, what Shmuel said, Ki koi chode kara aguda, when he had 1 foot on the bank of the river, the chode kara b'mabra, and 1 foot on the ferry, or on the bridge. Remember, we say this in order to show how clear was their memory of the events. Amalei Haki Amar Shmuel called the Amar mid the base Chashmonayim Malka Kasina. Whoever says I'm from the Chashmonayim dynasty, Avdu is a slave. The Lo Yishtayer Minayu, there wasn't left from them Elahi Ravisa, except for one girl, the Sokol Igra. She went up to a roof, Viram Yakala, and raised a voice for Amra. Called Amar mid base Chashmonayim Anna. Whoever says I'm from the Chashmonayim, Avdu, because I'm the last of the Chashmonayim. Nafla me Igra Omeis. Oh, immediately, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rav Nachman, Achriz Alei da Avdu, they announced about him that he was an Eved. Now, many families married into this person's family, and therefore, they were Avodim, and therefore the husbands were not mechuyev to give a ksuva to the wife if she was the child of an Eved. So Ahu Yuma Akrin Kama Ksuvasa Benarda. On that day, many ksuvas were ripped up in Narda. Kika Nafik, when Rav Yehuda was leaving Narda, Nafik Abbasre Lemirgame. They wanted to stone him. because he caused so much grief. Amalahu, he said to them, Ishasiku, shasiku, if you're silent, be silent. V'imlo, if not, maglina alaychu, I'll reveal about you. Hada Amar Shmuel Tarte Zar Isa Ika Ben Arda. There's two lines in Arda. Chada Mikrai Debe Yaina. One is the house of Yaina. The Chada Mikrai Debe Arvasi, the house of the raven. V'Simonik Tame Tame Tar Tar. So the family of the Erev is all Tame. Now, as the Gainim reveal, he didn't say this. He just said, I know something about two families. And if you don't leave me alone, I'm going to reveal it. So they they dropped the stones. So many people had come out to stone him. The stones that they dropped into the water caused a dam in the Nar Malka. The Kom Atma Benar Malka. There was so many people that came out to stone him. By the way, it's very good to see 28 Zoomers here this evening. And there would be more if Richard Rosenzweig would have came on, and Aryeh Perlman would have came on, and Harrison Kletzel would have came on. So we're getting a little bit close to our promised land over here. What?
Yeah, right.
Well, it would help if you did some work, you know.
I did. I was rebuilding my den today. A lot of work.
Maybe I should have called you the man from Narda. Now.
I'm not stoned.
Now we're going to have other announcements by Rav Yehuda. Machriz Rav Yehuda bepumpit.
I'm sorry, can I just ask you a question?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it have been proper for Rabbi Yehuda, being a big rabbi, to just tell the man, you're in a rush, go ahead of me, instead of being a slave, excommunicating him?
It wasn't Rabbi Yehuda. It wasn't Rabbi Yehuda, it was Rabbi Yehuda's attendant.
Oh, his attendant.
Right?
So what's Rabbi Yehuda?
No, it was Shammai the Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda's attendant.
Okay.
And you have to know that this is a very good point. First of all, mute yourself, Aaron, so everybody could hear. It's a very good point. There are times that a rabbi has to defend his honor. Because if he doesn't defend his honor, then he's not teaching Kavod HaTorah. And then Balabatim won't know about it. He's not talking about his own honor. He's talking about the honor of Torah. And if you don't teach people the honor of Torah, then what's the result? 24,000 Talmidei Rabbi Akiva died because they were not noig kavod zeh lezeh. Honor of Torah is not something to play around with. And that's why if you wonder sometimes why a rabbi will call out somebody for the disrespect of Torah, here, I'll give you an incident. A rabbi gets up and he speaks. And a chashuv, a person in the audience, in full display of everybody, takes out a big sefer and starts learning. That's a disrespect to the rabbi. Now, I'm not saying that the rabbi should embarrass him in public. I'm not saying that. But if he does, then he's doing it for a lesson. He's doing it for a lesson that you don't show public disrespect to the Torah. I remember that Rav Moshe used to tell us that if we go to a shul and there's a Rav there learning Mishnayos between Mincha and Maariv, and the yeshiva bacher says he wants to learn, he's learning a ketzais. He wants to take out a ketzais and continue learning his ketzais. He says, not when the rabbi is learning Mishnayos. That's not respect to the rabbi. It's a delicate thing, but Kavod HaTorah is deadly. It's deadly. It says that we learn out from the Mises Rabbi Akiva, there's over 900 types of ways to die. It's the gematria of Lamavis Toitzois. There's over 900 ways to die. The worst way to die is Askara. And that's what the Talmid Rebbe Kiva died because of a lack of kavod. So kavod HaTorah needs to be taught. The Gemara continues, and the Gemara says, Machris Rabbi Yehuda b'Pumpadisa Ada v'Yoinisin Avdei. Ada and Yoinisin are slaves. You can't marry them. Yehuda bar Papa Mamzera. Yehuda bar Papa is a mamzer. Bati bar Tuvia b'Rama Yisrucha, with his great arrogance, even though his master freed him, Lo Shokol Gita de Cherusa, did not take to get Shechrer, and therefore he's also not allowed to marry a Bas Yisrael. Similarly, Machriz Rava b'Mechuza, the great Rava announced in Mechuza, Baloi, Donoi, Taloi, Maloi, Zagai, all of these families, Kulon L'Psul, they're all of tainted genealogy. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Guvai, the family of Guvai is because they're Givonoi, they're Givainim. Those are Nesinim that are not allowed to marry into Yisrael. Durno Nisa, that city called Durno Nisa is because it's a Doroi Nisinoi, a city of Nesinim. Amar Rabbi Yosef, Hai Beikuve de Pumpadisa, the location of Beikuve and Pumpadisa, Kulam Davde, they're all slaves. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, Arba Meis Avodim, 400 servants, V'imir lo Arba'as Alofim Avodim, or 4,000 servants. Hayoloi lePashker ben Imar. Now Pashker ben Imar was a Kohen, so his servants were allowed to eat Truma. And because they ate Truma, women thought they were Kohanim. The Kulam Nitmu Bikuna, and therefore they got mixed into the Kuna. And of course, if they got mixed into the Kuna and if they married a Jewish girl, right, so those children are not kosher for Kahuna at all. The Kol Kohen Sheyesh Bayazis Panim, and any Kohen that's extremely chutzpahdik, you should know he's not really a Kohen. He comes from these avodim. Eino Yela Mehem. Amar Abaya, Kulan Yosman B'Shura de Narda. Now, Abaya lived after Narda didn't exist anymore. So the Chuvas HaGa'onim says that in the yeshiva Pumpadisa there was a row called the row of Narda. And they can be found in this row. However, Rabbi Elazar disagrees. Rabbi Elazar says the fact that a Kohen has azponim, that's just the nature of a Kohen. If you see him being brazen, al taharachav. Shenemar v'amcha k'merive Kohen. Your nation are like the quarrelsome amongst the Kohanim. Kohanim have a passionate side. That's why we said, if you remember, we had a special get kosher. Because a Kohen, he gets angry and gives his wife a get, he can't take her back because he's not allowed to take back a divorcee. So we make the get so complicated, so by the time he's finished making it, he calms down and he doesn't give it. If a person marries a woman that's not fit for him, when Hashem lets his Shechina dwell on Klal Yisrael, Lasid Lavai, Meyed al Kol HaShvatim, he testifies about all the tribes, the Ein Meyed Alav, but he doesn't testify about him. Shenema, Shiftei Ka Edus Yisrael. When Amosai have Edus Yisrael, when does Hashem testify about his people? Bizman Shashvatim Shiftei Ka, when they were loyal and married into the proper Shiftei Ka. When he devolves his Shechina, only those that have pure pedigree. I'll be for God, L'kol Mishpachos Yisrael. L'kol Yisrael, not for all of Yisrael, L'kol Mishpachos, all those that have a good pedigree. So the Gemara says an interesting thing. Amar Rabba Baba Huna, Zumayli Yiseri Yesh Ben Yisrael L'Geirim. This is an extra advantage that Yisrael has over a ger. Deal be Yisrael ksivu v'yisim lahem le'elakim. I am to them a God regardless. V'hema lilam, and they'll be to me a nation. Deal begerim ksiv. First they have to earn it. They have to be to me a nation. Whose heart is sweet. L'geshes elai num Hashem. If the ger proves himself and is to me a nation, then only then will I be for a God. Now for the last Gemara, the Gemara tells us that gerim can be like leprosy for Klal Yisrael. Amar Rebbe Chelbo koshim gerim Yisrael kisapachas. Gerim are bad to Yisrael like a sore. Shenema v'nilva hager aleihem, the ger will join us, v'nispechu al Beis Yaakov, and cleave to Beis Yaakov. And nispechu is also a lashon of a sapachas, a scab. Ksiv hacha v'nispechu, v'ksiv hasam l'seis u'l'sapachas. These are types of leprosy. So gerim could be like a type of leprosy. Now why is that? So Rashi says because sometimes gerim, they're not careful in the mitzvahs because they grew up without any mitzvahs and they're not careful in mitzvahs, and therefore Yidden that live near them might learn from them also not to be careful in the mitzvahs. Taisus over here says many different reasons that it's gerim are like a sword to Klal Yisrael. Taisus says one reason is because we're not careful in the honor of the ger. He was just a guy, and the Torah says in 24 places not to hurt the ger. So the fact that we have a ger, if we're not careful with his respect and with his honor, it could cause suffering to Klal Yisrael. So in that way, a ger is bad to Klal Yisrael. Taisa says another reason that the Gemara says, why did Jews have to be dispersed all over the land? So it says Jews had to be dispersed all over the land so that they should bring in gerim from all over the place. So now that there's Jews in Vietnam, there'll be gerim in Vietnam. And there's Jews in the wilds of Africa, so there'll be gerim in the wilds of Africa. So it's because of gerim that we had to be tossed around to the Arbakan Fasaretz. So that's another reason why it's bad. Another reason, which I believe Rabbi Avram, Ben Avram, the ger says, is that to the contrary, the ger is very careful in the mitzvahs. Like we see many times about tshuva is very, very careful how they daven. And that makes us look bad. It makes us look bad, and it causes a kitrig on Klal Yisrael. Look, he didn't go to yeshiva, he didn't go to cheder, and look how he's davening. You that had the advantage of the cheder, you should surely daven better, and in that way, it's bad for Klal Yisrael to have gerim. Taisa says other reasons here. Rabbi say, as I told you, this was a big daf, but it wasn't really taxing. I saw Marshall was able to sit back and have 6 francs. Can
I ask something on
and tomorrow night, in Yetz Hashem, the shir is again at 8 o'clock. I want to remind everybody that we do not have yet a sponsor for Lech Lecha. We're doing this again. So somebody out there, please come forward for Lech Lecha, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. Shortly, we're going to learn the Mishnah. What, Rabbi Kranz, what's your question?
Yeah, when Rabbi Yehuda said, put the rocks down or I'll threaten you with saying your lineage. I mean, we see that it was important for them. They did later. They said this person is this. Don't intermarry with them. They're avadim. These are mamzerim. It wasn't like that. I mean,
obviously, it was something that Rabbi Yehuda introduced. Yeah. In other words, he was one of the first revealers.
So it was important or not important to reveal it?
It was important, but the people didn't like it.
Right, but he didn't do it because they put the rocks down.
Oh, you mean why didn't he reveal the other families?
Yeah.
That's a good question. In other words, how did he get away with not revealing it?
Yeah, unless maybe it wasn't so critical.
Oh, no, it could be it wasn't so certain. That's probably what it is. It wasn't so certain. So he could have done it for a chash, for people to be machmer, and he didn't do it. We're going to learn now the Mishnah Yomis, Rabbi say.
Sorry, Rabbi.
You're very welcome.
Number 70.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Good night.